mid to late 1980s served to lay the foundation for our generation's palette of video games. Many of us cut our teeth on a Nintendo system as kids, and as we've become adults, our love of the medium continues to grow thanks to these early introductions. As we've grown, evolved, and adapted to new technologies present with each successive generation of consoles, so have these franchises. 25 years after the world saw the release of both The Legend of Zelda and Dragon Warrior, they still remain relevant today, still enjoying large fan bases more than 2 decades after their respective first entries. We take a look at how these franchises help shape the industry, and also talk about their potential future right here on Downloadable Content. Hello everyone, come one, come all, this is Downloadable Content. I am Brian, and with me today we have Nick.
Hello.
Chris.
What's up, Internet?
And Ryan.
Hello everyone.
I think you're forgetting someone.
Did I?
Yeah, Ron.
Fail.
Excellent! Well, that's because
We're off to a great start here.
That's because he's become a fixture on these things. He's almost
A recurring member of the podcast.
Yeah.
But still, just a terrible host, dude.
He's become a fixture, which means he's almost reached the office furniture stage.
How many episodes away am I from getting a cubicle in the corner office?
You're almost there. You're almost there.
Oh God.
You are becoming one of our fast fixtures here. Hi, Ron.
Hello.
It's not every day I have a panel this big.
Yeah, 5 of us.
I
That's what she
know.
said.
Thank you. How long did it take before this episode hit its first double entendre? All right. 2 minutes into the episode, away we go.
Not very long. This is going to be a good episode.
This is going to be a very good
Oh
episode.
Lord.
So we are continuing our anniversary, our milestone episodes commemorating classic gaming franchises. We started in the last episode with Danielle and Nick talking about Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, you got me playing like the whole multitude of Sonic games now. Thanks.
It's not a bad
And now
thing.
after this episode, I'm gonna have an inkling to play Wind Waker again. Thanks.
That's not a bad thing.
Ryan's fault.
While doing research on all these games for this series of episodes, I am longing for a Super Nintendo so badly. It's just. Ugh. So, Ron?
I was going to say, I got 2 Super Nintendos in my house, and they both, work, but they don't. The controller ports don't work. It sucks.
Ron,
I'm sitting next to gaming Nirvana of 16-bit juiciness, and the damn controller ports don't work. I'm having to take the thing apart. Yeah, I have to take the things apart and fix them myself.
You've got 2 classic paperweights. I'm proud. 25 years ago, back in 1986, we saw the release of The Legend of Zelda and Dragon Warrior, as it was called then, before it became Dragon Quest. both of them, pioneering the video game industry in different ways. Dragon Warrior being an RPG. Legend of Zelda, much more adventure-oriented. But both of them, as I mentioned in the intro, still are very popular, some more popular than others, and they continue to put out games and still appeal to gamers today. And that is what we're going to discuss, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, Mr. Rogers.
Let's put Mr. Hamster in the microwave, okay?
Let's go.
We're gonna start. I'm gonna open the discussion with Dragon Warrior first. We'll save Zelda. We'll put Zelda aside for later.
Aw.
I know.
Take with that as you
for
will.
last.
Thank you, Nick. We're gonna say, both. I mean, I'm more familiar with the Dragon Warrior series than I am with the Zelda series, but they're both still outstanding series. Both of them have their own merits. Both of them have their own disadvantages. Some very maddeningly, frustratingly so. But we'll open with Dragon Warrior. So we'll begin there. Dragon Warrior was originally released in Japan in 1986, May of 1986, and it is regarded by many, it's regarded in the video game industry. There were a lot of firsts, a lot of things that were done in Dragon Warrior set the stage for many other RPGs to come after it. It was created by a video game company called Enix. Enix made the first 7 Dragon Warrior games before the Square Enix merger. And all of them, every Dragon Quest game maintains the same degree of frustrating difficulty. This is a series in which not a whole lot has changed. I mean, obviously graphics have gotten better with each new system, but the core gameplay still, by and large, remains the same. And for Dragon Warrior is kind of a weird thing, because Dragon Warrior enjoyed huge popularity in Japan. Massive so much success in Japan. It shatters sales records in Japan with each successive installment, yet in the US, we really could care less.
I think the first thing behind it was we really weren't used to RPGs at that point. The real big, RPG at the time in the 1980s was Dungeons and Dragons, and that was in paper and book format. It was for a video game, this was unheard of.
It was very unheard of. I mean, Dragon Warrior and the early Final Fantasy games did borrow very heavily, and by borrow very heavily, I mean almost outright steal from.
They walk that fine line between plagiarism and creative honoring.
Yeah, I think there was enough of a difference where you couldn't sue the pants out of each other. But, starting with the first 3 Dragon Warrior games, the first 3 Dragon Warrior games are one story. It is one story arc. The
story of Erdrick.
Of Erdrick, or Lodo, as he would become in the Game Boy re-releases. The Dragon Warriors had a lot of firsts. It was the first RPG to use the top-down perspective that we've all fell in love with.
Ah, yes, memories.
In the 8 and 16-bit era. Even now, first RPG to have the idea of spendable magic points. So it was the first to use MP as something that could be used and replenished, and you could spend points to use magic. So you could, instead of having what you had in the first Final Fantasy, whereas you could only, in the first Final Fantasy, you could only use a certain spell X number of times, in Dragon Warrior, you could use whatever magic you had as long as you had the MP available to use it.
Yeah, Final Fantasy was more traditional to the Dungeons and Dragons scheme of 4 first-level spells, 4 second-level spells, 3 third-level spells, whereas Dragon Warrior decided to do something, as you said, have like magic energy inside the person.
Yeah, they just said
however they wished.
Yeah, they just said, fuck you, Dungeons and Dragons, we're doing our own thing.
Which was a great thing.
It is. I'm not denying that.
It was the first of its kind, and
because without that, you don't have the system most RPGs are based on today.
Right.
If you ask.
If you don't walk into magic shops to buy or spells. You learn spells as you level up, and again, and every time you leveled up, if you were a character that used magic, you gained MP with each successive level up. In the first Dragon Warrior game, it was a very one-on-one system. There was no party. It was just you as the hero. There was no party, and to preserve some element of fairness, every time you got into a random battle, you only had one enemy at a time.
And it was still hard as hell.
It was.
Yeah, I played it when they re-released it for the Game Boy, and I just put it down because I was like, "This is too hard."
Well,
then again, I was a little kid at the time, so
we've been spoiled. I mean, but yes, I mean games like these. As I finished Dragon Warrior 2, I realized why I beat so few NES games as a kid.
they were hard to sell.
Yeah. I was proud to beat Dragon Warrior 1.
Oh yeah, if you beat the early Dragon Warrior games, it was an accomplishment.
It's like being most NES games at the time because
Yeah.
it was hard as hell. And if you could beat him without cheating, that meant
That
you were
was
a
the
game
whole
god.
point of lastability
You should
from
be proud
an
of
NES
yourself.
era game, because they had the little cards, there wasn't much data on them, so how do you extend game time? Make it as hard as hell.
Exactly, and you know, you were very lucky because Dragon Warrior used, well, in the NES version, it was released. It didn't make it over here until 1989. So 3+ years had gone by, and by that point, already a couple of Dragon Warrior games were out in Japan. But one of the things I think, you know, while in Japan, they viewed Dragon Warrior as a challenge, and a challenge worthy of conquering. In the United States, we did not like the sheer difficulty.
It's too hard.
We did,
And yet we,
As we went with everything else.
as we started to struggle through Legend of Zelda.
yeah. It's, you know,
Yeah.
we hated Dragon Warrior, but yet Legend of Zelda, which is the first Legend of Zelda game, which is so completely non-linear.
Oh yeah,
We-
it's
we
ridiculously hard.
We loved it. So go figure. So
What I really did like about Dragon Warrior, though, just to get a little on topic, was the whole how you gain stats in that particular game. Your name determined your stat growth throughout the entire game.
yes, it was an interesting mechanic. I mean, in every Dragon Warrior game, you have the option. You have to name your hero or heroine. The other characters in the game have already, you know, named for you. But yes, you have the option of naming however you want. Dragon Warrior 1, obviously, you had just one hero. Yeah, just the one character. Nintendo Power magazine, funnily enough, I remember they were giving away free copies of Dragon Warrior to subscribers. In an effort to try to get the word out in the U.S. I mean, it was a good marketing ploy. Hey, subscribe to a magazine, get a free game.
Yeah, didn't they do something similar with the Final Fantasy game as well?
I believe they did.
Yeah, because that really did help, you know, get the name out. And again, while it wasn't as huge as a success as Final Fantasy was, you know, it did the job.
It did. And, you know, I think the 3-year gap in between the Japan release and the US release certainly didn't help in the US.
No, you're right about that.
You know, at the time, you know, according to OneUp.com, they said that American console gamers were not used to the idea of RPGs. It would take a decade for the genre to become flashy enough to distract you from all the text you had to read.
And yeah, I did not like reading as a kid, so that really didn't help me much.
A lot of texts, a lot of reading. Very difficult in the early games because, you know, most games, RPGs, if you hit game over, you just, you know, you have to restart from your last save point. In Dragon Warrior, and this is true for every game in the series, you were punished severely.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you died, you were punished.
Half your gold.
Not only did you lose your progress in the dungeon you were just at, you went back to your last save point, you lost half of your gold, which is a very hard commodity to come across, and, oh, by the way, you have to go back and you know, do your dungeon again. And also in the early games, not only did you lose all your progress, you lose half your gold, you have to go back to your dungeon, and by the way, we only revived your hero. You still have to spend tons of gold to revive your other 2 party members.
So if you died while you were fighting a dungeon boss, you were basically fucked.
Oh, yeah, no kidding, because generally, I mean, Dragon Warrior 1 wasn't that bad to lose half your gold. I mean, it was still pretty bad just because of the fact that you're trying to buy the new gear so that way you can live at more than 2 hits. But in the subsequent ones, when you had party members, it was like 500 gold to resurrect a level 6 party member.
Jeez.
And gold was coming across in like 2s and 3s.
Yeah, it was the mathematics behind it is actually 50 gold per level of the character. So if you're reviving a level 10 character, then it's 500 gold. By that point, you're in the 30s, so that's a whopping 1,500 gold. That ain't cheap.
Yeah, especially considering that even at that end stage of the game, like the enemies only drop like 15 or 20 gold apiece. You're talking about sitting there with 2 corpses next to you as you're out in the field slaughtering slimes and God knows what else for hours on end just so you can get your party members back up.
Well, there was the Leaf of the World tree, which can revive a character at 1 HP, but
1, count them, Jim. 1. It's a very, very difficult game to play. I mean, obviously,
EW2.
Yes. So, Dragon Warrior had a lot of firsts, very successful in Japan, exploded popularity in Japan.
So much so that they actually cannot release the game on work days because people would call out.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing would get done in Japan. The whole country would stop. We'll move on to further games. Yeah, Dragon Warrior 2 and 3. 2 being so friggin' difficult.
Sacrifice, the most brutally unfair spell in RPG history. At the cost of the user's life, you can kill all opposing enemies 100% guaranteed.
Yep.
The problem with this spell? Enemies have it.
Yep.
Wow, that's really cheap.
Yeah.
Because who cares if the enemy's dead if you're all dead?
That was the thing, and having just beaten it, I mean, the enemies that do have it occur very late in the game, final dungeon area. But yes, it was a rare spell, but if an enemy used it, sure, the enemy killed himself, but your party was completely wiped out in the process, so back to the last save point.
See, correct me if I'm wrong in this.
Spell is your friend.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could have sworn in Dragon Warrior 2, they did include an item that if you did die, you would re-resurrect yourself at 1 HP.
Yeah, the Leaf of the World tree.
Yeah, but I mean, like, in battle, though, like, it wasn't the Leaf of the World tree, it was like an auto, like, re-raise from, like, Final Fantasy.
I don't think so.
I think it's Dragon Warrior 3, and I believe that spell's called Vivify.
Okay.
But regardless, I mean, because the final dungeon area was so difficult, and we're talking about the random battle rate skyrockets.
The enemies are incredibly hard.
So in order to give you hope, and I think Enix did this for laughs, the last save point before the final dungeon, they knew that you were going to die so often that they made it so that if you died and went back to this save point, all your party could be revived for free.
Yeah, I do remember that final save point, yeah.
Yeah, that's a saving grace.
Yeah, it was nice of them, but yeah, they knew you were going to die, like, a lot.
So, Dragon Warrior 2, as we've mentioned, was the first in the series to actually have a party. It was no longer just the one-on-one. You had your hero, which was a fucking tank.
No spells.
Yeah, just complete brute strength, but no magical ability. Then you had a prince who was kind of a middle-of-the-road, almost a red mage sort of person, who had, some...
He was more your offensive spellcaster.
Yeah.
He was your decent attack, nowhere near as good as your hero, and some magical ability. And then you had your princess with no strength, but
she had
the typical female character.
The typical female mage, classic
5
mage.
5 HP, 500 MP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has so much MP, but if you blow on her toe, she dies. That's about the sum of it.
Their names were dependent on your name, actually. There was a list of 7 names your name determined not their stats, but their names.
Yeah, and which, whatever.
No one cared. We called them Prince of Canuck and Princess of Moonbrook.
Yeah. And then Dragon Warrior 3. Dragon Warrior 3 was the first to introduce a job class system. It was the first one in the series to do so. It was released in 1988 in Japan, 1991 in the US. Of this first 3 games of the story arc, the third one had the least success in the United States because when it came out in 1991 in the US, Super Nintendo had already been released.
Widely overlooked, but it was one of the best games in the series, probably next to Dragon Warrior 4.
It was, the North American release of Dragon Warrior 3 did not meet as much success because the Super Nintendo was out at that time. It was considered an improvement over the first 2 games. A reviewer from Gama Sutra, said that Dragon Warrior 3 kept the same ugly graphical style and clumsy interface.
Well, that's because you're going through 2 worlds in that game. Jesus, so you kind of have to have memory restrictions. You're going to lose something.
And the game did tell, for the most part, a story, and it was the first game of really its kind to really feature cutscenes. And that was about as best as you were going to get with an NES.
Yeah, luckily the first 3 games were re-released on Game Boy Color. And, so they got a nice a bump there. They cleaned it up a bit. But, I enjoyed it. Now, chronologically, if you were playing these in chronological order, it would be 3, 1, 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, I enjoyed 1 and 3. 2, not so much.
I wonder why.
2, I reached a point on Facebook where I just wrote, okay, Dragon Warrior 2 isn't fun anymore, now it's work.
Yeah.
And you're not getting paid for it. It's like you're at an internship.
Suddenly this has become, almost Final Fantasy 2 work.
Don't remind me.
God, that would have been fun. That would have been fun. Not only does Enix throw all the difficulty of Dragon Warrior 2 at you, but then they say, "Oh, we're not using experience points. You have to level up individual stats." That would have been done. The only reason why I beat it is the same reason why I played Final Fantasy 2. I wouldn't want to play the entire series and have 2 left to beat.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you had a long-term plan, Final Fantasy 2 was not horrid.
I beg to differ.
Better than Final Fantasy X. I'm sorry.
I beg to differ.
Story-wise, I gotta go with Nika.
So, and I hear background.
I think he's trying to punch through.
I'll say yes. Feel free to jump in at any time, Chris. We don't bite.
Who's trying to break the 4th wall?
Here's the problem with Dragon Quest. I played like the first 3 Dragon Warriors, and then I played the one that came out on PS2. Then I was like, you know what? They're all the same. And I was like, I'm done.
Chris, that is definitely one of the criticisms of the series as a whole. Not a whole lot has changed in terms of the presentation, the basic gameplay. I'll give you that.
I'll give you that too. Dragon Quest 1, the comparison between Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 9 in terms of the changes, the graphics.
Yeah,
that's about it.
That's
and possibly some storyline, elements.
Yes.
But you played 1, you played them all. I've only played 1, 2, 3, and 8 myself. So,
well, we will definitely get to 8 because that was my introduction to the series. Was 8. So, we move on to Dragon Quest 4 and 6. Dragon Quest 4 was the last game of the series to be released in the United States until 7, because Dragon Quest 4 was released on the NES in Japan in 1990, and then it was released in the USA on the NES in 1992, and at that point, the Super Nintendo and Genesis wars were in full swing.
Yeah, at that point, nobody cared about the NES.
They were in full swing. We dumped the NES like a sack of potatoes. It was.
I'd be surprised if Dragon Quest IV made it over 10,000 sales on the in the US.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because in Japan it's widely considered to be the best title of the entire series.
Because Dragon Quest IV did so poorly in the United States, Enix said, "Fuck this."
Yeah, because at that point they were really wasting money sending it overseas here, because they weren't making any money.
Translation costs, the overseas shipping costs. Yeah, it really
exactly.
was not
It was
censorship issues.
Business-wise, it was a bombshell for them.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, and again, 1992. What were we doing in 1992? We were at wars, seeing who was better, Mario or Sonic. So
Mario.
Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6 were another one-story arc. It was the Zenithia trilogy. Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6 would be long forgotten, kind of like Final Fantasy and their run of not releasing games in the U.S. Only Square had the good sense to attempt to renumber the series, which only created confusion when all of them finally did make it over.
Yeah, no kidding.
So now it's like, if you have a discussion about Final Fantasy with somebody, if you talk about Final Fantasy 2, you've like, wait a minute, 2?
You mean Final Fantasy 4?
Yeah, no.
4, 5. Yeah, they tried to prevent confusion by renumbering it. Great job, Square.
Great job, Square. However,
we will never let you live it down, Square.
With the success of Dragon Quest VIII, though, and at this point Square and Enix had merged, they decided that they were going to remake and re-release Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6. They were going to re-release them for the DS. So finally, in 2008, we got to see Dragon Quest 4.
I think it's important to know what got Dragon Quest VIII so popular in the first place. By this point, we've been exposed to, RPGs, and we're finally understanding and appreciating the concept of them. But what really helped sell it was the actual artist behind the Dragon Quest games, which is Akira Toriyama. For those who don't know, that's the same artist who made the Dragon Ball series. Which
Trust me, we all know.
Yes,
we all know
who Akira Toriyama is.
For the 5 people that don't know,
continue.
All right. And that's very true, although Nick, he also designed the characters for every other Dragon Quest game. We just never saw them. We just never saw them because you can't fit Goku in sprite form.
Oh, I'm fully aware. I'm just pointing that out, that at the time of Dragon Quest VIII, everyone was looking at it like, that looks very similar to Dragon Ball Z. So, and then we checked because it's the same guy.
He also did the art for Chrono Trigger. So,
yeah,
and Chrono Cross.
So, while we're on that subject, Nick, thank you for a segue. We'll jump to 8. We'll go back to the previous ones shortly. But Dragon Quest VIII was released on the PlayStation 2. It was released in Japan in November 2004, and it came over here exactly 1 year later. It was the first in the series to use cel-shaded graphics. Graphically, if you've played this game, it is stunning. It is
very lovely.
It's a very pretty game.
Yeah.
First in the series to have full 3D environments. It was the first one to be developed by a very good game developer, Level 5.
People who brought you Dark Cloud. Excellent game.
Again, first Dragon Quest game to be made after the Square Enix merger. It is this particular game. This game is the #1 top-selling PS2 game in Japan. This one beats out.
That's not a shock.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah, me neither.
And here's the shocking part. It did very well in the United States.
That is shocking.
Yeah, it did well enough that they re-released 4, 5, 6, 9's now came on the way. This really helped the series take off.
The funny part is this. For all eternity, the biggest criticism of Dragon Quest was that, it's too simple, yada yada yada, it's too, outdated. Suddenly, that became one of its positives.
I think part of the reason for that was because by this point in time, we had seen the convoluted plots that Square was putting out for the Final Fantasy series, and people, the RPG aficionados, were kind of like, "Oh, we don't want to deal with your convoluted Final Fantasy plots. We're just going to go out and play Dragon Quest and just go around and killing slimes."
Suddenly, Ron is suddenly a character from Daria, but.
Do you hate RPGs with Deus Ex Machinas, confusing plots, and annoying characters? Do you never get tired of slaying dragons and rescuing princesses?
Well, we've got an RPG for you.
Do you enjoy level grinding for hours on end for 90% of your gameplay time?
It was just very, very.
Thank you, C. Bailey.
Very, very, very funny to see that for all eternity, just the complaint, oh, it's too simple, it's too easy. Then Dragon Quest VIII comes along, and suddenly we love the simplistic, obviously, Final Fantasy XII was out at the same time, so it was suddenly simplistic became refreshing after just how complex, say, Final Fantasy XII is. And I'm just going, this is why video game reviews are bullshit, really. This is...
But back to Dragon Quest VIII,
Cover me, Dickens!
Yes, Chris, go on.
I think the big reason that it did really well was it's the first Dragon Quest game that was released with the Square name attached to it. And over here in America, we had this great idea of Square games being so good.
Brand recognition.
That is
exactly.
That is true.
7 was really good. 8 is probably one of my favorite in the series, and then 9 was but we all knew that Square did really well with RPGs, so the Square and the Enix merger did really well for the Dragon Quest series. It gave us a game that had the brand recognition behind it of Square, and it let all of us go, oh, maybe we should give this a look.
Yeah, now that you mention that, Chris, I do remember the early commercials for that game. They specifically went out of the way to say from the makers of Final Fantasy.
Exactly.
Really...
That was a good marketing tool.
It's better than your mother's gonna hate this, but
Actually, I thought that was brilliant.
That's why I bought Dragon Quest VIII, was because it was made by Square.
That is also one of the reasons why I bought it, and I just wanted a new RPG to play. But yes, this was my introduction to the series, and I was very, very impressed.
Yeah, I think Square was the reason why all of us really started on the Dragon Quest games. Though I only played it for about 6 hours before I snapped from all the level grinding.
What are you talking about? I played Dragon Quest when it first came out on the Game Boy version.
Okay, there are exceptions to the rule.
I played the Game Boy versions after I played 8.
Yes, so did I. After 8, I decided that, well, I'm like, I've beaten all the numbered Final Fantasy games. Let's tackle this.
There aren't as many of you as there are in Final Fantasy.
So, because of the success of Dragon Quest VIII, as you said, Nick, it encouraged Square to release 4, 5, and 6. 5 and 6 had never been even released in the United States until they were made for the DS.
Are they any good?
I think so.
I have been hearing good things about them.
Well, Dragon Quest VI, Dragon Quest V, in particular, you can actually use and add to your party monsters that you encounter in the field. You can actually have them as part of your party. So I found it hysterical that I managed to level up a slime really high.
I thought they had that concept in Dragon Quest IV, though. Maybe I'm mistaken here.
No, they didn't have any sort of monster additions in 4.
Okay. I'm not exactly familiar with 4, 5, and 6 yet, so I'm not 100% certain on that, so thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, 5 you can, and it was just very gratifying to decimate a party with a slime. It's just hysterical.
There is something very amusing about that.
Does the slime ever actually get stronger? Like, is it actually a decent party member to have?
If you add monsters to your party, once they're part of your party, they will level up like anything else. They will level, and and if the monster is part of your party has magical ability, their HP and MP will go up as well. So it's rather amusing. It's like a Goomba taking out Bowser. It's really...
I want to see that.
It's really, really fun. But 4 and 6, one story arc. Dragon Warrior 7 was the last to have the Dragon Warrior name to be attached to it. Dragon Warrior 7 also has the distinct honor of the first Dragon Quest game to not be released on a Nintendo platform.
Yeah, fight the man.
Yeah, that whole issue back then.
You know, last game before the Square Enix merger. Unfortunately, when Dragon Warrior was released in the United States, which was in November 2001, the PS2 was already in full swing, so...
Whoops.
Yeah. That probably didn't do too well.
But...
Yeah, I played 7. I beat 7. I liked it. I got it for Christmas. And it was a very fun game. The graphics were a little outdated. I agree with the common U.S. criticism of that. But I liked the story.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, 6 and 7 are the only two that I have left to beat, and so that's what I will be tackling. I just started 6, so Dragon Quest IX came out in 2010, summer of 2010. It was a DS only game. Dragon Quest IX goes back to some of the maddening difficulty that of the NES games. I did have to do quite a bit of level grinding for Dragon Quest IX.
I didn't find it that difficult. Then again, I was keeping up to date with the job leveling, switching people over to newer and better jobs, and then I found the beautiful thing that is the thunder thrust on the liquid metal slimes.
Yes, because that Dragon Quest IX, you can so heavily exploit the leveling up by going to a place that has metal slimes and liquid metal slimes. Suddenly, if you're a level 1 character, and say you're with a level 30 character, and that level 30 character takes out the liquid metal slime, suddenly your level 1 character jumps to level 7.
And that's one of the key points of level grinding throughout the Dragon Quest series is finding those really
Find
good
the metal slimes.
Yeah.
Find those really good spots to level grind.
To give an idea of what the experience is needed to level up, in Dragon Quest VIII, to get from level 64 to 65, it's close, if memory serves, it's close to 2 million experience points, and you're killing enemies that give out
a few hundred at a time.
A few hundred.
Yeah.
And the metal slimes give out 1,024. Liquid metal gives out 10,056. I think the king metal slime gives out 25,000 and some odd number.
Oh yeah, I mean the Dragon Quest series kind of uses the D&D system of leveling up, where you need a whole shitload of experience points to move up levels. So. Dragon Quest IX was the first of the series to feature multiplayer. It actually set a Guinness World Record for, I think, the number of chance Wi-Fi encounters.
Damn.
I mean, because of just how popular this series is in Japan, you can bet your ass that the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection was flooded with all these people. Well, because one of the great things about the multiplayer is that you could connect to the internet, and you could ask somebody's player to join your own party for your own game.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really unique.
And
I've never heard that concept before.
And you can even trade items in between the two games. Now, granted, those items are only like treasure maps for the random dungeons they have.
Yep.
But that also makes it really easy if you can get a map that contains nothing but those metal slimes. It just makes it a really easy spot to go and grind out a level really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you could...
It does.
I mean, Dragon Quest IX was also the first to make it so that you created your own party. You did not have to go find NPCs to join your party. You actually went to this one spot near the beginning of the game where you could create your own person. Is it going to be male or female? What color skin are they going to have? What color hair are they going to have? What job class do you want them to start off as?
What do you want their stats to be?
Yeah. So, lots of customization in Dragon Quest IX.
Still traditional JRPG?
Yes, I mean, it still plays like a traditional JRPG. Although, I find the great thing about Dragon Quest IX is that you could buck RPG stereotypes. So, my party had a male bard, a female martial artist, a female ranger. I created a female paladin, a female warrior, and a male mage.
I'm gonna have to pick this game up.
I wanted to have a male that could experience what female characters had been going through for all series long. I wanted
in every other RPG.
Yeah. I wanted to have a male character in which you could give them a paper cut and they die.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty funny because the main character starts off as a bard, and generally leaving him as a bard throughout the entire game is not a bad option.
Yeah, I didn't change him at all. He had some pretty good abilities. But again, 800 billion thousand frugal pupillion experience points to go from one level to the next. But, although we've noticed that the later Dragon Quest games, because, again, 1 through 3 is one story, 4 through 6 is one story, 7, 8, and 9, they're each standalone games. And with each successive game, Square is incorporating more plot into each game.
I think that's partly the Final Fantasy bleed over, and
well, yeah, now that Square's running the show.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I personally like that there was that reference to the past and from like Dragon Quest 1 or Dragon Warrior 1. And
it would make things a lot more interesting if they went back to that style of storytelling.
It would. It's kind of good, and good if they try and tell a brand new story. Good if they try and emphasize a beginning, middle, and end. But it's also nice when they do make references and ties things into other Dragon Quest games. I think it could go either way.
Yeah, when I first heard,
I think the tie-ins for the past games would be a good gift to the fans who've been with the series since the beginning.
See, when I first remember hearing about Dragon Quest IX, when talking like the very first inklings of it being released, like they originally were thinking that this would be a sequel to Dragon Quest VIII, and that you would be on the wagon again with slight spoiler alert here. And so, for those who have not played Dragon Quest VIII, please, for the love of God, play it, beat it, and then beat it again to get the hidden ending. Is that you would start off on the road with the princess, just adventuring with her.
Medea, yes. That was fun. So, Dragon Quest X has been announced.
Really?
Dragon Quest X was announced, about a year ago. Nothing, and that's really as far as it's gotten. It's been announced. And
nothing else yet, huh?
Nothing else yet. The only thing that we know about is that it's going to be a Wii exclusive. According to Square Enix, this is going to be for the Wii.
Waggle controls ahoy!
Well, they did that before too with Dragon Quest. They had a spin-off on the Wii.
Wasn't it called Dragon Quest Swords or something?
Yeah. I think it was called Dragon Quest Swords. It did use the Wii remote as your sword, and it was okay. The controls really weren't that great, because like you would try and do a parry and instead you would do a thrust, and that kind of got a bit weird.
Yeah, I could see that, but I mean, if Dragon Quest X is going to retain its simplistic game structure, I don't see it having a problem. I mean, hell, you could do any one of these games by just flipping the Wiimote sideways.
Oh yeah, I think that's probably what it's going to be. Is that
sounds like what's going to happen? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if it had the option of using the sword in battle, like in a one-on-one conflict or a cutscene or something like that. But it probably is just going to be flipping the Wii remote to the side and using like a regular controller.
Especially now with all this whole Motion Plus and everything.
Yep. So, we're going to close out the Dragon Quest talk with a couple of final thoughts on the subject. The music.
I think every single title of it has incredible music.
Koichi Sugiyama, who is the composer, I think I just butchered the name, but that's okay.
Close enough.
You just Americanized it. It's fine.
That's fine. He's the composer. He's about 4,000 years old. He's the composer for the entire series. He's composed for every single Dragon Quest game. He is revered as a god of music in Japan, much like in the same way Nobu is. Well, that's second half.
One.
Second
Wrong.
half.
Wait a minute.
Jumping the gun. The music for Dragon Quest also is so popular in Japan that they regularly hold concerts.
Yep.
I want one of those.
Check YouTube.
They regularly hold concerts featuring the music of Dragon Quest. I mean, if you listen to the soundtracks, they are very orchestral, very grand, sweeping,
Beautiful to listen to.
very, very, it's just, you listen to it and it's just like,
Suddenly I feel at ease.
suddenly there's a nice breeze blowing. And,
Sun is shining, the birds are chirping.
although April was funny. If you listen to the world map music for Dragon Quest VIII, April's listening goes, this sounds like I'm listening to Gone with the Wind. It's very grandiose, sweeping music, and they're all done. You can find the soundtracks all over the internet. They're there, and just fun to listen to. And he's still, I think he's almost 80 years old, but he's still going strong. He's become synonymous with the series. So,
Yeah.
Which begs to differ. What's going to happen with the series music-wise when he finally kicks the bucket?
well, take a look at Final Fantasy. Nobu has, by and large, stopped doing music for the series.
Which is true, and the music is still wonderful for the series, but I'm still partial to his music. I can tell when it's Nobu and when it's not,
Yes.
Yeah.
He has a very distinctive style of music that he uses.
They did do a song for Final Fantasy 13 where he did contribute one song, but compared to every other song on the track, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not very good.
Yeah.
I thought that was for Final Fantasy 12, not 13.
12.
It was
Oh,
12. He didn't do anything for 13.
All right, I was mistaken, but still, it stuck out like a sore thumb.
But you're right. It did stick out to the rest of the soundtrack.
Even to the point, Nobu is so well known that, you can tell what was the one piece he contributed to Brawl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really obvious.
And so, Sugiyama, again, very synonymous with the series, great music. And Nick, you touched upon this earlier, the art style.
That's what captured me at first was for Dragon Quest VIII was the art style, the direction of it.
Well, this is Dragon Quest VIII was the first time we could actually see, what the characters were supposed to look like. The artist who designed, he's designed the characters for all the Dragon Quest games. You just didn't actually see it until 8.
He designed a lot of the monsters too, and that is an important fact to carry over because while he may design like a lot of characters, and it's hard to see the character details. Yeah, bless you. Is that the monsters, like, they generally look the exact same from Dragon Quest 1 up to Dragon Quest 9. You look at a slime, you tell me the difference between a slime in Dragon Quest 1 and a slime in Dragon Quest 9.
No, he's done them all, and you really see that his style through each and every one of the games for all the characters. I think he's designed everything about Dragon Quest.
Definitely the characters and the monsters. That definitely belongs to him.
That's his style. You can easily tell.
Even though I didn't know who the artist was at the time when I played Dragon Quest VIII. When in Dragon Quest VIII was the first of the series to feature a tension function, where you could
Yeah.
Psych yourself up.
Super high state of tension. What does that look like, ladies and gentlemen?
You would psych yourself up. By doing that, you built up your strength. And in 4 turns, now the character gets really pissed off. It kind of looks like a limit break. But the first time I performed a full tension on the main character, on the hero in Dragon Quest, I went, wait a minute, he looks suspiciously like Goku.
It's over 9,000!
It was like, Super Saiyan! Wait.
I'm looking, and then I did some research, and I found out who did the art for. I'm like, well, that explains a whole lot.
And I explained everything once we found out. I was like, oh!
I'm like, oh, it's Goku! He's in Dragon Quest 8! This is great! And then, the one thing that was missing was the move that spans 30 minutes.
You mean the transformation that takes an entire 5 episodes?
Yeah.
Next time on Dragon Quest. Next time on Dragon Quest.
The same shit that's been happening in the last 3 episodes.
So there you go. So while Dragon Quest has always been popular in Japan, it is starting to actually finally gain a foothold here in the United States, and I'm hoping that's a trend that will certainly continue. So
I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
I don't think so either. So
nope.
We'll close the lid on Dragon Quest in our second part of this anniversary issue of downloadable content. We go to Hyrule. We will go talk about The Legend of Zelda / Link.
Go get my Master Sword. Wait.
Yes.
I got my Triforce shirt on.
Get your ocarinas, your red magic potions, your magic fairies, and get your batons. We'll be back with Zelda Chat right here on downloadable content. You guys are nuts.